great. I guess I'd like to start by going back to the title of Nigeri's presentation, This is Too Much Pressure, which I love, because that, I think, sums up the larger field within which all of you are creating. And certainly, it would be unrealistic to think that, we could come up with, some grand solution to that pressure in this room tonight. But I think you each have put forward, examples and suggestions and stories that talk about how that pressure might get relieved in different ways. So, just as it's not on any one of you or any African-American person to solve the problem of centuries of systemic racism and the fallout from that, it's also just, I think we can enter the conversation by thinking about, well, what do each of your projects and practices offer sort of in relation to that pressure? How does it maybe ease it up? So just to put that out there kind of as a way to frame this. So I'd like to ask kind of about reception and impact, which is a word we hear a lot here at Bayback. But reception to your work. I think with Ubuntu, that's very much built into the process of coming up with these exhibitions, working with the community, getting feedback at all times. But Joshua, I was curious, what if you could talk about, what has the response been to doing these stories, and does the response vary depending on how whether or not the story is presented with more light or more heat? And then we could go to Nigeria.
It varies. I mean, my biggest challenge is getting people to actually listen to me rather than just kind of to be comfy with the sound of my voice. Because a lot of people listen to public radio and consume public media as kind of a companion. And so they hear me and they get so comfortable with the sounds of the world's most beautiful news that they just stop paying attention. I mean, I've had plenty of people come up to me like, oh my God, you're the guy with the radio, you have the best voice. I was listening to you the other day and I was just remarking about your elocution and how articulate you are. You did this story the other day that I absolutely love. And I say, oh, well, thank you. What was the story? I don't know, but I remember that I loved it. My challenge is constantly being incisive and making sure that people aren't just listening to what I do on KQED to remind themselves how smart they are. I love that old quote from the late Peter Jennings, God rest him, where he said, the more I learned, the less I knew. The more I learned, the less I knew. The more I learned, the less I knew. And I want people to be constantly coming forward to our product and to our service, I should say, as a reaffirmation of their own ignorance and their desire to fill it, and the knowledge that the more you expand your view of the universe is expanding beyond you faster. So my challenge is not even getting reaction. Reaction will come. We have an extremely engaged audience. My challenge is just getting incision and making sure that you don't understand where we're going in the story. And this is one of the standards I teach all of the interns who come through. And I beat up some of my coworkers for this too, because some of them do it better than others. You should understand where we're going in the story in the first sentence of the lead. You shouldn't have to listen a minute in. You should know where we're going at the very top. So then, we're just walking you from scene to scene. There shouldn't be that much mystery, especially in news. And if we do that, people will get the whole narrative. They'll sit in their cars, they'll wait till the story is done, they'll get out, and they'll be like, oh my God, I'm late for work. And they'll run in, and they'll tell people, this is why I'm late, because I heard the story on KQED. They'll go to the website and hunt for it. And if we do that well, the engagement will happen. And connections will happen. Like, we've done stories about community organizations that were trying to take on some societal ill, and then people will start calling the newsroom. Like, well, I'd like to help. I can help out. I've got some money. I've got some supplies. I've got some time. And they'll just materialize if we tell the story well. Because what I do in the morning is so competitive. Like, NPR's own research shows that people who listen to Morning Edition listen as one of 6 media sources they receive at the same time in the morning, while they're doing, on average, 5 different tasks in, on average, 2.6 different locations. So my competition is not KCBS. My competition is Spotify. And it's your 4-year-old. And it's the dog that crapped on the carpet. And it's your email. And it's waiting for the BART train. And it's trying to find your exit on 880 and trying to park in the financial district. And in the middle of all that, I'm trying to tell you an incisive story. And I guess for me, the challenge is always the same regardless of the topic. Maybe that's unique to what I do because of the nature of our audience, but I don't want anyone to think that just because KQED is a big, powerful station, that it's easier to tell a story. I think it's way harder because we have to cut so much deeper and louder and like, hey, come back, nuh-uh, follow the bunny, woo, back here. And make sure people are really with us and they're not just like, I'm so smart. I love listening to public. I'm such a good person. I'm in the Signal Society, and oh, that young man is so articulate. Oh, I'm such a good citizen. No, hey. There's this thing that we spent a week reporting, and you have to hear it right now. That reminder that we always have to compete for audience's attention, that every story is a chance to gain or lose a listener. And I'm not losing this one. I'm too competitive, and I hate to lose. I'm a bad loser. No sportsmanship, none. That's my constant fight as a news anchor and as a journalist, just to make sure people aren't too comfortable and too cozy around me. I don't want to just be this domesticated pet that you walk around and turn on and go to 885 and you can kind of stroke my fur when you feel like it. I want you to know that whenever you're close to me, I might tell you something that will cut you and will seize your consciousness and will mess up the way you view yourself and me and others, and it's for your own good because you've trusted me with that relationship. And if I don't keep doing that and keep people on their toes when they're listening, then we might as well just play Mozart.
Dang.
But I listen to Mozart in the morning.
Well, okay, that's not the competition. Mozart.
You're losing your audience.
I've already lost it. Long gone. And she was in a story on KQED last week, so now I'm doubly offended.
No. But for me, I have a kind of an opposite problem because a lot of my films and work premieres in festivals or online, and so people, it's like a situation where people are kind of seeking you out, so they're already kind of open to being receptive, which is good. And it makes me think, well, I want to make sure I'm doing work that is for the community I'm doing, but also to the community that maybe thinks differently, and how can I change their mind? I want to always speak to the choir. So that's something, those are two, I think, different focuses I have in my work. But to me, like, what's most important is that the community I'm filming feels represented. So for that story in Perry County, Alabama, like, I was so nervous. Like, we made sure to premiere the film there. Before we had any other festival, we had to make sure we premiered there because this is their story. And I need to make sure I have their okay first. There is no movie theater in Perry County or the county next door, so we had to bring our own projector, had to buy a portable screen, we had to arrange for PA, and we had screens in different parts of the county to make sure that people who were affected by a story are able to see it. And one of the biggest, I think, successes I'll ever have in my career is when people, multiple citizens kept coming up to me and be like, you really got it. This is our story. In a way that New York Times didn't get it, and ABC didn't get it, but we got it because we really listened to them. And so to me, that's like the best kind of reception that my work can have.
Melanie, Laura, do you feel like you're working with a similar goal in mind, given that so much of what happens under the banner of Ubuntu really seems like a process, right, or that's ongoing. So people who are, from setting up the space in which an exhibition happens inviting participants to then getting other people to see the show to then having a dinner like that or a sort of community dialogue event, right? Like,
It's all about, for us, we're just learning non-attachment, non-attachment, non-attachment over and over and over and over again. And the power of listening as well, because when you're attached to an outcome, you rob yourself, the people that you're engaging with, the people who will encounter the final product, from really experiencing the life of said project, said exhibition, said whatever. And so it goes back to when we were sharing how we really wanted to stick with Can Our Save a Community, and we almost had to change the name because so much came up. Like, what do you mean by save, and what do you mean by community? What about neighbor? We were like, well, hold on. You know, who came up with this anyway? And then we're like, okay, don't be like that, don't be like that. So, you know, just being confronted by so many factors allowed us to just say, all right, let's just be completely open to what happens with this project. If there are hurdles, if there are roadblocks, if people resist it, if people are all for it, whatever happens, we are completely open, because it's a deeper story than what's happening in 2014 and 2015. It's about the first African Americans who, you know, came to San Francisco, or other communities who landed here. It's about the artists who migrated from wherever and made Fillmore what it is, or made the Mission what it is. It's also about the people who bulldozed them out, and why it's okay to paint over murals that have been there, which is the reason why we're here anyway. It's about a Renee Yanez, you know, it's about all these different people. And so if we're attached to an outcome, we don't get to veer off and learn more. We don't get to veer off and make those connections. So it's just so important to just not be attached. That's what I've learned in this process, at least.
Yeah, and it's really helped us ride the waves that come with it, because you know that that's a part of it. And so the interpretation of anything that comes our way is just an opportunity to assess what that is and what people's experience is, versus going, ooh, that didn't go well, so we're not going to talk about that. You know, it's like really covering it all, because there's something in that story. There's something in what that person is sharing. There's something in what we might get wrong or what we might mess up. You know, it's something in all of that. So really just being able to be that space for it to happen, you know.
I guess I liked the frame you presented, Nitri, of the rules of engagement. And it seems like with the Ubuntu project, the process of asking questions to a group of people assembled in a room sort of generates the rules of engagement within that space. And I guess with your work, Joshua, you're following like certain rules, like best practices of investigative journalism, right? That's kind of steering your narrative. But I guess like have there been times when you've had to maybe develop rules of engagement for to steer kind of how something has been received, as opposed to having them frame the generation of something?
I think, if I'm understanding your question correctly, I don't think I've had to worry about the way things are received, partly because I have no power over that. You know, what goes on in your brain after you hear my voice is in your brain. There's nothing I can do in your brain that may be a good thing. I have no power in there. So my job is to be as creative and as compelling and as concise and contextual as I can from here. How you receive it, that'll soon be up to you, but all I have control over is what comes from me. I can do a little more of that in certain formats. Like when I guest host Forum, which I do every now and then. I'll be guest hosting a few days again next month, which I really enjoy doing. And it's a totally different experience than newscasting. It's way, way easier than newscasting. Newscasting is hard work. But when we've done episodes of Forum about diversity, I don't always remember, but I try to remember to say, before we begin this conversation, let me just say that this is a safe space to say whatever is on your mind. It would be better for you to call in, say the wrong thing, and let us walk you through it, than to keep that in mind and never have a chance to bring it to the light. So please call in, please write in. In that way, we get some amazing conversations out. We've gotten some great calls from people who have bared their souls and realized prejudices they didn't know they had until they had a chance to not only walk through these issues in a non-threatening way that wasn't wonky and brainy and intellectual and dealing with the complex realities and the various facets of life for diverse communities, but that was real and had people speaking in their own real voice, but also a space where we said, just say it. We know it may not come out right. We're giving you dispensation. Just say it anyway. And we've had people who've called in and said things that they just didn't land right. I will be in the studio, and then the guests will be around the table, and you can see that look, like something will come out. I forget who it was that asked the question, but we often, when it has to do with issues of race, someone will throw out a question of, it's the classic kind of, why do we need BET, there's no white entertainment television, that kind of question. And I could see the people around the table be like, and so I can hear their eyes rolling over here like, really? We're gonna have this conversation again, really? And I'm listening, and then before the guest jumps in, I'll jump and say, so what you're trying to say, I think, sir, is, I'll try and kind of scrub it a little bit and get some of the
raw,
the muck off. Try to get some of the oil that needs to be changed off.
Yes.
And in so doing, you humanize everybody, and you make it okay to be ignorant. I think we have such an intolerance for ignorance in our civic space. Not that we should settle for ignorance, ever, but we are so intolerant to people saying the wrong thing, and we're so quick to get offended that it makes it hard for hearts to soften and for minds to open. Part of what I like doing is giving people space to just be whoever they are in that moment. All of their strengths, all of their weaknesses, intellectual and otherwise. Then, only once you validate people, then you can have the intellectual conversation. Otherwise, you're telling people they have to come in a certain way, and they have to say a certain thing, and they have to believe a certain thing, and they have to already know certain things prior. We're not going to teach you anything. You know this already, right? And it just, it makes for a very vanilla, empty calorie conversation that is neither nourishing nor delicious nor worthwhile. And I would rather just give people the permission to be ignorant, to be unlearned, to be new, to be the immigrant to the Bay Area who doesn't know who Mark DeSaulnier is, or doesn't know how to get from San Rafael to Nevada, or doesn't know, what happened in the Fillmore, that they literally tore that community down. Or who doesn't know who the Reverend Amos Brown is and why he's significant. That's okay. That's not your job to know everything. It's our job to go after it together. And I think once we lay the framework for that, that's when amazing things happen.
Can I say something? that makes for a really great show, right? But isn't there
Call
also
KQED and tell them that. I'm ready.
Isn't there also a value, and maybe if you have a statement and you know it's ignorant, to maybe just not say it and then just listen. Like I was at a panel much like this for the International Documentary Association, and it was about the importance of diversity in documentary films with a bunch of like diverse filmmakers, but also people who funders and broadcasters who value diversity. And there's a white filmmaker there, and at the conference they had to really encourage people, hey, white people, you should come to this conversation, because otherwise I don't think any white people would have showed up. And they had to say it a couple of times. And then a guy, there's lots of like, hey, it's a safe space. And a guy, a white filmmaker, these are white liberal filmmakers for public television, was like, I don't understand that there's a place in my neighborhood, a hair salon called Nappy Salon, but how come Don Imus gets fired when he calls people he calls those basketball players nappy-headed hoes? And I was like, if you don't even understand that, like how can you can't take in any of this conversation.
But that's a very worthwhile question. And it's an answerable question. But it's
answerable.
It's a
Is
total.
that worthwhile?
I think so, because if he comes out, if he's got the guts to say that.
First of all,
you must have had a little talk with Jesus before you got here. Then fine.
Jesus said, "Shut up." Don't listen.
Well, I just applaud your courage for having the courage to say that, like in this room. So good for you, sir. And then there's an opportunity to teach somebody about the power of gaining, of legitimacy. There's a reason why Dave Chappelle could use the N-word in his comedy all the time, and we considered it incisive and revolutionary and brilliant and groundbreaking, but when your white friend is rapping along to some rap lyrics and throws the N-word out, suddenly he needs stitches. Like, we understand that, because you don't have the cultural currency to understand the depth of that word, so you have no right to use it at its extremes. If you fully understood the depth of that word, if we knew that we were on the same wavelength, that you really had a respect for the concept under the word, we'd let you use it. That's why there are a few white comedians who can throw that word around and nobody gets upset and everybody laughs, because they've gotten to a point where we get it. And I think if you can articulate it to people in that way, that's how minds change. Now that's hard to do in the moment, especially when you hear it. It's easy. It's right. It's hard to do.
I ain't never.
But you know what? Whether or not he asks the question, that's not about me. That's about him. He still thinks it whether he says it out loud, and I can either be part of the solution and say, okay, thank you for asking, here is an answer to your question, or I can just be mad at him. But either way, what he said isn't about me, that's about him. So I don't have to wear that. I just have to respond.
You have to understand that most white people live in mortal fear of being called racist. That is our greatest problem. I think that's just how that's how this discussion happens in America, right? It's like it's a matter of blame, right? It's like, well, you are racist, or you said this racist thing, and like white people immediately go on the defensive, right? Or they alternately tiptoe and have these really like weird conversations where it's like, great, we're all diverse and diversity is great, yay. And oh my god, I have a black friend, that's cool, right? And I think that's, I like how, to return to your work and the Ubuntu project and the various ways in which that's materialized, it really shifts the terms of how that conversation can even happen, right? It's like, all right, so we're in this situation together that is monumentally screwed up and like in much larger ways than maybe one person can comprehend or change. But like in this moment, in this place right now, like what are we going to do about the fact that you want to live here and you want to live here makes this locally owned black business like have to leave because they can't afford their rent anymore?
And the bigger piece is, the term that's come up in a lot of our conversations is like, just don't come through Columbusing our communities. Like, come through say nothing if you must. If it's too difficult for you to engage and, you know, interact, just say nothing, observe, and see what's going on. There's a lot of savior mentality of, oh, you know, this is all wrong and we need to, you know, clean it up and do X, Y, and Z, and you're not even aware of what people are already doing to make things happen, nor are you aware of the challenges they've had to face to do what you've been able to do in one click of a button. So there's a lot to deal with, you know, with that, and there's a lot of responsibility that white people have to have around how you can operate and move in a lot of ways that we don't get to. And so, you know, with the conversation and like not making people wrong and all that, it is about having it where people can be as ignorant as hell, because the fact is the ignorance is living out and our children are dying every 28 hours. So we've got to have the dialogue. If that's what we've got to do, and I've got to hear you say some stupid shit, then let's do it. You know what I'm saying? Because you're thinking it anyway, and you're perpetuating it in your community, and it's okay for now that, you know, now we're the target, and we've been here all along, like Patanisha. You know, I've been here all along, and all of a sudden I don't belong? How did that happen? And it's like white people are the only community that does it wherever you go. And just be real about it. Just be real. As a whole, like that's the legacy. And we have a legacy of being, if I just walk in your store, I'm gonna steal. If I just, as a black male, if I show up, I might rape you, kill you, take your purse, anything. But that's the legacy that they have based on BS PR, BS media.
Propaganda.
But no one wants to talk about the legacy of white folks. It's like we grip our lives when you show up. All you grab is your purse. How is that fair?